Give me the nod for past. Hello and welcome to this press conference hosted by the Interparliamentary Alliance on China on behalf of the residents of the Royal Mint Court Residents Association. To open the press conference, I'm going to give the floor to our chair, Lord Alton of Liverpool, who is the chair of the Joint Committee on Human Rights but is speaking in a personal capacity today, is also a member of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China and sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party. Lord Alton.
Thank you, Duke. We now know that in spite of years of campaigners, lawyers, parliamentarians raising concerns about the People's Republic of China mega embassy, the government has decided to go ahead anyway. We are in a dangerous geopolitical moment. China is explicit about their desire for what they call the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. That ideology is not about fair competition on the world stage. It's about subjugating the United States and reshaping the international order in the image of the Chinese Communist Party. When Keir Starmer goes to Beijing with the title deeds to the mega embassy in his pocket, I hope he will take with him copies of the Joint Committee on Human Rights report on slave labour and our supply chains, and read those sections that deal with the use of Uyghur slave labour. I hope he takes with him a copy of our report on transnational repression, which deals with the sorts of things you'll hear from Chloe Chung about, who gave evidence to our committee and who has a 1 million Hong Kong dollar bounty placed on her head. And I hope that when he goes, he will raise the case of Jimmy Lai. It is outrageous that any British Prime Minister should go to Beijing whilst a British citizen is incarcerated, languishing, along with many pro-democracy campaigners in jails in Hong Kong and in mainland China. I want to say one other thing, that we stand at a very dangerous crossroads. This morning some of us heard from the chair of the Speaker of the US Congress, Mike Johnson, who is here in London at the moment. I cannot believe that when I heard Ronald Reagan speak here in the 1980s, when I was a young member of the House of Commons, in the middle of the Cold War, that it would have been conceivable that any British government would have given the keys to a new embassy in London, a mega embassy to the Kremlin, knowing what they stood for. And I find it amazing, having heard Mr. Johnson this morning, who referenced the case of Jimmy Lai and talked about this dangerous moment in our geopolitics. I cannot believe that we would want to be so out of step with our allies as to go ahead with this decision. We're going to hear from some very significant people now during this press conference. The first of them is Christopher Mung.
My name is Christopher Mung. I am one of the Hong Kongers who has moved to the UK for political reasons. I have had a bounty of 1 million Hong Kong dollar imposed on me by the Chinese Communist Party. We know China. We know Chinese Communist Party and their intentions. Already, we have seen the United Kingdom fail to hold China to its promise over Hong Kong. Our people were abandoned to the mercy of the CCP. With our only lifeline to come and settle in the UK. Now, the menace that drove us from our homes is invited to do the same here. we are very much worried about this. This decision has struck fear into our hearts and made many regret of taking up the UK's promise of our safety.
My name is Chloe Chung. I'm also from Hong Kong and also have a bounty placed on me. I'm angry and disappointed at Labour's government's decision. We have held several large protests outside the Royal Mint Court, which have shown beyond doubt that the area is not suitable for an embassy. Major roads have been closed every time we have gathered, causing traffic chaos. We are also told that access to historic ruins on the site will be guarded by Chinese police. People like me will never be able to visit these sites of UK's heritage. I know that if I go in, I will never come out. This site will accommodate hundreds more Chinese state employees. We know what that means. More interference, more influence operations, and more intimidations of people like me.
Thank you. My name is Rahima Mahmood. I am the Executive Director of Stop Uyghur Genocide. I am Uyghur myself, and I cannot really express my fury and dismay at this moment. A few years ago, the Labour Party said from the dispatch box that my people, the Uyghur people, were being subjected to genocide by the Chinese Communist Party. It is the same party and the very same people now who are caving into China's demand to build this monstrous embassy. I do not have words to express the grief of my people at being abandoned by those we had come to rely upon. While Uyghurs like me are enslaved, shut up in camps, our women sterilized, our children forcibly separated and subjected to state-run indoctrination, and our voices silenced by threats against us and our families. The UK government is inviting the criminals responsible to create a huge outpost for their criminal behavior here in London.
My name is Mark Nygate. I am the Treasurer of the Royal Mint Court Residents Association. I am a resident on the Royal Mint and have been for 27 years, and when I first moved in there it was Crown Estate land. We residents have fought this application since we learned that our homes have been sold to China without warning. This has been a long David and Goliath fight. There is now only one way of stopping this, a judicial review. So I am today announcing that our judicial review to challenge the UK government's embassy decision begins today. We have to study the decision, but we think there are a number of grounds for review which we will develop. Firstly, predetermination. The possibility that the government did not have an open mind towards the application. Secondly, redacted rooms, whether or not it was lawful for the government to take a decision without knowing the purpose of large parts of that building. Thirdly, access to the Abbey ruins, whether the compromise reached with the Chinese is lawful. Fourthly, some of the procedural issues, like for example the fact we have been asked to make representations on the basis of unpublished Foreign Office notes which have been unable to review. We have a GoFundMe which we can access to the QR code on this banner up here. If you want to contribute, we will fight this all the way. Thank you.
I'm Luke de Pulford, the Executive Director of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China. I'm reading this message on behalf of Ian Jinby, solicitor. Ian Jinby of Mishkon Direya has been instructed by the Royal Mint Court Residents Association to commission Lord Banner, KC, to pursue a legal challenge against the decision of the Secretary of State to grant planning permission pursuant to the application made by the Chinese Embassy in the UK to develop Royal Mint Court into a new embassy.
Thank you, Luke. Now, if I can invite the participants to come and stand in front of the banner together. And thank all of you as well for being here. Obviously, it would be pretty pointless if we were just talking to ourselves. But if you have questions you want to ask any of the participants, could you just raise your hand, but also would you mind saying where you're from as well, because that will give our participants some idea of who they're speaking to. Who would like to go first? Gentleman here.
The answer is no. We've had nothing from them.
Safety is clearly a key question for us. You heard from Chloe and Christopher about the bounties that are placed on them. There are at least 10 people who have bounties who are UK residents. And our Joint Committee on Human Rights, when we heard that evidence, said that China should be placed in the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, as Iran and Russia have been. That has not happened, and they've even, of course, refused to use the word threat, but that is a word which the head of MI5 has used. So there's great confusion here, and I do worry for the people we've heard speak today about what the implications are for them. So thank you for that. Gentlemen. I'm not persuaded by the arguments myself, and indeed I've heard contrary views put by people who have worked in the intelligence service and in security as well. How do you manage people like the spies who have been operating across Parliament? How do you manage people who are working in espionage? I think unfortunately there is an expectation on our security services to do things that are completely impossible to do. Gentleman here.
Well,
does it mean that you've launched the process, the legal process today, or your solicitors going?
The process.
I wonder if
Yeah.
you could give
Sorry.
us a full answer.
Yeah. The process that we've followed is that now that the document from the planning inspector has turned up, and now that the government made the announcement, we will pass that on to barristers to give us feedback. And that is the first stage of this process.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, just that Lord Banner has been formally instructed. There will be now some reflection on the best way forward. There may be a pre-action letter. Of course, there has to be a hearing to see whether or not the judicial review will be accepted. But we anticipate that that's going to move pretty quickly. It may even move before the Prime Minister goes to China, but let's see. It's a very detailed planning decision from the planning inspector, and it all has to be pored over.
Okay, so you haven't actually launched it today, it's just that the barrister's been instructed to kind of look into it and go ahead with this process.
Yeah, well, the barrister has been instructed to go ahead with it. So yes, the grounds for the review will depend upon all of the detail which needs to be processed.
Thank you. Gentleman here, member Lady Beck.
Yep. I have said that having had the demonstration on Saturday and being approached by many people at the demonstration, they have been holding back, waiting for the decision to be made before they put money in. So I expect that will be easily achieved. Also, this story has gone worldwide. I'm getting interviews from people like Australia and Japan, and they are sending the message out as well. So I have no fears about not getting that money.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Lady here. There should never be a trade-off between national security and trade. You heard from Rahima Mahmood about the position of Uyghur Muslims. One of the reasons I've been sanctioned is no doubt because I worked with Rahima on the position of Uyghurs in Xinjiang. In our report that I referred to earlier on, we looked at the way in which trade becomes lopsided, because how can you have fair competition with a country that is using slave labour? So I don't think there is a trade-off to be had. I think it's a myth as well. We have had far too much dependency on the People's Republic of China. We need to make ourselves more resilient, and that should be the top of our priorities, not making more trade deals with the CCP. That's a question you need to direct at them. It's not, I mean, we've directed it at them and we've had unsatisfactory replies so far, and I can tell you that the mood in Parliament, right across the piece, it's difficult for some Labour members of Parliament to maybe speak out on this because of party loyalties and whipping, but certainly some have spoken out about it and others have privately mouthed their own concerns. I hope that they will continue to do that and at least urge a moratorium, not to proceed with this for 6 years, to see how world events work out perhaps before rushing ahead headlong into this agreement. So Keir Starmer still has the chance. He doesn't have to now go ahead and say do it tomorrow. Lady here.
Do you think that the government is stuck between a rock and a hard place? Like they had to approve this, otherwise they would have no trade with China, they would lose space, and then if they didn't approve it, then China would just walk away and take it.
I think that this is a mess of their own making. They should have made it clear right from the outset that they would look at other options with the People's Republic of China. There's no one here that doesn't think that they should have the right to have an embassy in London. That isn't the issue. It's whether you have a mega embassy on this particular site for all the well-known security and other reasons. The psychological advantage to the PRC is quite considerable too. So I think they've talked themselves into this. I think they should talk themselves out of it, and maybe using the situation worldwide, which doesn't need describing here because we're all aware of it, as a reason for holding back on moving ahead with this decision. There's no reason why they shouldn't place a moratorium and not proceed. And certainly once the legal action has been commenced, that should give them another reason for doing so.
Okay, two more questions, one here and one here.
How embarrassing do you think any disclosed documents in the judicial review?
Disclosed documents in the judicial review.
If it emerges through disclosure that the UK government gave assurances to the Chinese that they would get their embassy, then those assurances would have been unlawful. If that comes out through disclosure, anybody involved in that process is likely to have to resign. So it could be extremely embarrassing, it could be catastrophic for the government. But we tried to raise concerns about this earlier on and say this is what you're going to be facing if you allow this embassy. They went ahead anyway.
Gentleman here. I can't speak on behalf of other participants, but for myself, I do not think this is the right place or the right time to be allowing a mega embassy in the heart of London's commercial and also cultural centre. Looking at the layout on the plans, who would not be concerned about seeing more than 200 rooms? Who wouldn't be concerned about seeing underground rooms that no one can give any explanation of what they would be used for? So I would want to do more than go back to the drawing board. I think this is not something that we should be doing now because it sends the wrong signal.
What makes you
I think that that's a decision for governments to make in the context of the moment, when they can see, for instance, that British nationals like Jimmy Lai have been released from prison, when there are no more pro-democracy protesters still languishing in jail in Hong Kong, when they do something about Uyghur genocide. When all those things are put in place, then maybe we can start to do business with them on a fair and proper footing. But to say those things don't matter, which is the current position of the British government, is not acceptable.
Thank you very much indeed, everybody. That concludes the press conference. If people want to speak to any of the participants here afterwards and perhaps organise an interview, they will hang around for a bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
A bit more than I